I had done Supernatural, and at the time I had done Supernatural, which was a show that, under my tenure had no standing sets and was an entirely different, town every week. I said to myself, how could I make that even harder?
Right.
So we came up with the idea of doing a different historical period every week. This show is creatively the most fun I think I've ever had. Logistically, by a mile, it's the hardest show I've ever produced. Right. It's insane. And I think the audience will really be the beneficiary of an incredible amount of blood, sweat, and tears. Because we're thrilled with how it's coming off. But yeah, this is a damn hard show to make.
I can imagine.
Because we're only doing it, every place we're going, every world we're building, it's only for one episode.
Right.
We built Ford's Theater, and built it a historically accurate one, shot it, tore it down. We built the Alamo in a Vancouver parking lot, shot it, tore it down. We're building Mission Control, NASA, 1969. We're going to shoot it once and tear it down. And it's incredible. It's so fun to watch the episodes and see how different the worlds are, when I'm looking at cuts in the editing room. But I really do look forward to the headline of timeless producer dies of stroke on toilet.
Speaking of that, I don't know if you can share, but how do you find ways to get those efficiencies in the production so that way you can do this week after week? What's the challenge? How do you solve it?
The honest answer is not well. We're really committed to quality. The audiences are so much more sophisticated than they used to be in the 80s, say. And part of that's due to my partner Sean Ryan. Part of that's due to guys like JJ and Damon Lindelof, and the bar, Joss. The bar has been raised on the quality that people expect from television. Thank you so much. And so you have to actually do a credible contemporary version of the Alamo. So there aren't an incredible amount of shortcuts. The thing that we find is that you have to be smart in the writing. It has to start with the writing. You can't have every scene set on the street with hundreds of extras. You have to have one scene set on the street with hundreds of extras, and then they duck into a hotel room. And so it's just, you have to be very clever about how you stage it. That's the only way. We were hoping in the beginning that we'll just build a bar and it'll be the bar in 1860 and the bar in 1960. But the history, which our brilliant production designer, John Marcinick, who I brought from Supernatural, he's so committed to the research, and God love him, he's like, a bar in 1960 does not look like a bar in 1860 era. Those are two different bars, my man, and I don't want to be the one to say no. So it's hard. I'm not going to lie. We're all working our asses off to create these worlds, but the report from the editing room is that it's worth it.
Speaking of the writing, how do you narrow down which historical events you're going to focus on? Because I'm sure there's a ton that you guys would love to cover, but they may not fit in the story,
right.
May not fit in the budget. So could you just talk a little bit?
Yeah, we don't have any hard and fast rules, but the ones we always try to look for are, especially in the beginning when you're trying to launch the show, we look for what's an iconic moment, but what's a moment that hasn't been played to death. For instance, the pilot's a great example. Everyone can remember the Hindenburg newsreel, but people don't really know that much about it. Versus the Titanic, which we would never do because my heart will go on and everyone knows everything about it. The Lincoln assassination, when it first came up, we were like, really, are we going to do Lincoln? Is it too familiar? But then we dug into the research. We have a historian who lives with us in the writer's room, it's such a fun writer's room because we have literally a historian with us. And once he started talking to us about how, no, it was part of a much larger conspiracy to kill the Vice President and the Secretary of State and General Ulysses S. Grant all within a half hour of each other. And Lincoln was the only one that was successful and then the others all failed, we were like, well, nobody knows that. I didn't know that.
Right.
You know, and that John Wilkes Booth's brother was literally the most famous actor in America. I didn't know that. John Wilkes Booth's brother saved Lincoln's son a year before the assassination. Like, you start finding these details that you're like, okay, we got to do this because it's an iconic moment that nobody knows anything about. So we really start there, but then we're always looking for an angle. And then on top of that, look, more than anything, we can have history up and down and great big scope. None of it matters if the characters aren't great and if the actors aren't amazing. Luckily, we're blessed with, I think, a really deep bench of really fantastic and complicated actors. So we also spend a lot of time saying, I get pitched a lot historical stories, and Sean Ryan does too. And our answer of why we reject them more than any other is we say, well, what's the emotional angle? And what's it mean to our characters? And how do we show deeper facets of these actors? Because they're so good that what we want to do is keep showing their depth and complexity. Because, you know, look, here's the truth from somebody who's had a show that's gone, 200 plus episodes now? Some episodes are good and some episodes suck out loud. It's just the truth of it. But if they love the characters, you're in. So more than anything, the priority for us is make America fall in love with these guys. And if we can do that, then we have a show.
Along those lines, actually, can you talk a little bit about the social implications, the social setup? You know, you have Rufus and you have Lucy.
Yeah.
Pretty vulnerable at any time in history.
Yeah. There was, look, it was when we were deciding, like, okay, who's the team? There was a very conscious decision to say, well, you know, let's make one of them a woman and let's make one of them African American. Because the reality of history as we know it is that it's primarily written by a bunch of rich white dudes. But there was other history happening at the time. And for us it was, well, this is an opportunity to really explore history that not many people know. I mean, again, if the mandate of the show is we really want to, we see ourselves as this epic romantic historical adventure more than a sci-fi show. And if we're going to these historical periods, we want to show people facets of history that they don't know. And what better way to do that than to have those characters, which are entrees, into worlds that were there and were vibrant and were fighting and struggling and had art and were these beautiful worlds that just don't get the airtime of all of these wealthy landowners in powdered wigs. And so it was a very intentional choice. And the way we play it, because look, we're here to entertain people. I'm this close to being a carny. You know, like, I don't have illusions about who I am. We're not here to make some grand social message, but we're here to present a realistic version of the past. And racism and chauvinism were a part of that. And we want to touch on it. And I think we touch on it in a way that's just, our word in the writer's room is like, we just want it to be real. Like, you know, we're not trying to do we don't have an agenda one way or another. We just, if you're walking around as a black guy in 1937, there's going to be some reality to that. And if you're walking around as a black guy in World War II Germany, there's going to be a reaction to that, you know? And so we just play the honesty of it. We're more interested in being honest than anything else.
There are some genre shows, Lost, that have that kind of lost their way along the way because they didn't know how to finish things. Are you guys mapped out to an end point where you can solve all the mysteries? You know what everything means?
I mean, here's the truth, and any showrunner who tells you different is lying.
Okay.
You never have, like, the years and years and years plan. It's
right.
just, you can't hold it all in your brain.
Sure.
Even Supernatural, where I kind of had like this, there's this like, oh, Eric had this famous 5-year plan. The truth is I knew what the first season was, and then I had these cocktail napkin sketches of what I hoped was going to happen from there.
Right.
And I would say that's true here. We have a pretty solid sense of what season 1 is. We have a reasonable sense of what season 2 is, and then a couple ideas of what, and that's how you do it. I mean, the best way to describe it is it's like a roadmap, and we're in LA and we want to get to New York, and we know it's somewhere in the middle. We want to hit Chicago. And that's how a season of television really operates, which is because you want to leave room for your writers to surprise you. And so you know that if you meander and, hey, maybe we'll go check out the Grand Canyon, but we got to hit Chicago. Right. And then you do, and then you hit New York. And that's really how it goes. I mean, that said, the one thing I will say, and look, my last show was a Bad Robot show, and so I have great affection for those guys. I am not a fan of endless teases and endless mysteries. I think anyone who watches my work sort of know that I like a very kind of healthy, kind of muscled approach to storytelling. I don't see why it's wrong to answer questions. I don't follow, because almost every question can open the door to a bigger and scarier question.
Yep.
So to me, and then the longer you withhold a question, the more amazing the payoff has to be, and then you start to collapse under your own weight.
Yep.
So, for instance, in this show, within the first 10 episodes, we're going to answer who Rittenhouse is, what they want, what they're all about. But once you learn that, it gets scarier. Right. Because now we know who they are and what they're about. And what they're about is something really scary. Right. So I can promise for fans who catch into the show, they will be rewarded in short order to the answers to these questions. I want people to feel like they're in the hands of confident storytellers, which I think we are. I think they are in Timeless.
Well, Abigail was mentioning how she keeps pitching musical episodes, and she mentioned about viewing like I Love Lucy. So, is there any time period or anything that you would like to be able to work in?
I have amazing affection for the blues guitarist Robert Johnson. Anyone who watches Supernatural, I basically created a whole core of mythology based around my love for this guy. Generally regarded to be the best blues guitarist ever lived. The rumor is he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. Lives in this amazingly evocative world of like Mississippi Delta and juke joints, Juke, and like these sort of traveling gunslinger guitarists who would travel from one joint to another playing, and it's so rich and atmospheric, and these fascinating characters who went on to basically, for all intents and purposes, create modern American music, because everything from jazz to rock is owed to these guys. That's the episode I'm dying to do.
And is there anything that you think might be beyond either your capacity or maybe the realistic capacity of the time travel group to actually adapt to?
Dinosaurs, we're not doing dinosaurs. We have this sort of unspoken rule that we want to keep it to sort of within 300 years for now, because we can pull that off. Once you're like cavemen or dudes in swords, and because there's no English, it's so hard, and at least if they go to Germany, at least people can speak German. But you go to Old English, no one's even going to understand what the hell's anyone saying. So yeah.
So the time machine in Timeless is really cool, but I was wondering what some of your other favorite time machine devices are from pop culture.
The DeLorean.
Yes.
There's nothing cooler than the DeLorean.
Damn right.